We are live and recording, says SquadCast. Hello, everybody. My name is Ariel Nissenblatt, and I am SquadCast's community manager. Very excited to hang out with you on a Friday afternoon. Please let me know in the chat if you can hear me loud and clear. Would also love to know in the chat where you are joining us from today. We are on our journey to the weekend and just very excited for one last learning opportunity before we take a little break. In a few moments, I'm going to introduce Sabrina and Garret from the podcast I Know Dino to talk about building a community around your podcast. Obviously, this is something that is very near and dear to our hearts at the SquadCast team, and that's because we have really made a bet on community. We have a great product. You can record your podcast video and audio in studio quality, and we love that you do that with us. We're so grateful to all of you SquadCasters out there, but we also have a really robust community that you can join. Folks who are part of our Squad Pod community, please let us know in the chat. We'd love to shout you out. And while you're doing that, I'm going to put the link to our application form to join the SquadCast community into the chat. So we've got a Slack channel, we've got Facebook groups, we've got tons of ways for you to connect with us that are beyond just the in-studio experience. We want to be part of your podcasting journey beyond the time that you are recording. So shout out to Greg, shout out to Keith, shout out to all the folks who are here today. We're just really grateful for you that you're taking your time to be here with us today. Let me see if I have any more announcements before I bring Sabrina and Garret up to the stage. I wrote them down in my notes. Okay. So yes, I posted let me know if you have an echo. Let me know if I have an echo. Steve says I might have an echo. I can try another microphone method if so. Thank you, Alex, for putting the link in the chat. Really appreciate that. Another thing that you can do to stay in touch with us, Squadcasters and potential soon-to-be Squadcasters, is by following us on social media. We're at SquadCast FM all over, and we post a lot of helpful information, so we'd love if you join us there. So what should you expect in the next hour or so? I'm going to invite Sabrina and Garret up to the stage. They are going to talk to you all about how they built their community around their podcast, I Know Dino. Then we are going to go to some Q&A, and let me do some orientation around the screen for you. If you look to your right, you should see the chat box. Please feel free to be extremely active there. Ask your questions, say your comments, tell us where you're from. We would just love to interact with you. If you look at the bottom, there is an Ask a Question tab. That's specifically where your question should go that you want Sabrina and Garret to answer at the end of this session. So make sure you pop your questions in there so that we can get to them. There's also a poll section on the bottom of the screen, and there Sabrina and Garret are going to be asking some questions that we're going to do some polling for. So I'll post those questions in there. So that's where you're going to want to look for that. And that's about it. That's the roundup. That's all you need to know in order to have a successful next hour or so. If you have any questions, I'll be in the chat throughout. And that's about it. I'm going to invite Sabrina and Garret onto the stage now. You guys can feel free to enable your camera, and then I will disable mine. Welcome. I don't think we can hear you. It's because your microphone's off.
There we go. Hello.
There you go.
Try
There
again.
we go.
Okay, so I am going to minimize myself unless you need anything from me.
All good.
Nope.
But
All
I'm
right,
going
have
to
fun, you
share
two.
screen. Thanks. All right, I'm just going to quickly share our screen and we'll get started. And hopefully you're all seeing it's a building community around your podcast and also our logo, which is a T-Rex. All right.
Let us know if you can't see it.
We don't see anything yet.
You don't see anything yet. Oh no. Okay. Let me try that again.
And again.
Come on.
Interesting.
Uh-oh.
What is it saying?
It's saying that it's working, but it doesn't appear to be working.
Maybe do you want to send it to me and I can put it up?
Sure.
Okay. Thanks for bearing with us, folks. We are just dealing with some technical difficulties. It is sometimes difficult to live stream, so we appreciate you.
This is.
In the meantime, we'd love to hear from you about your podcast. If you want to put a little link into the chat, we'd love to shout out some podcasts.
Oh, can you see
you
it
did
now?
it. You got it.
All right, good.
Okay. It didn't let us share a window, but it let us share the Chrome tab.
Okay,
Was the
sorry
secret.
about
All
that.
right, good to know.
We've got this now.
Excellent. All right. So I'll just kick it off, and I'm going to say we're going to be talking about building a community around your podcast, but this is sort of from the perspective assuming that you have a podcast already. However, if you don't have a podcast yet and you're thinking about starting one, it's also a good time to start a community. Or if you just want to have a community around your business in another fashion, I think a lot of these tips could be useful too. So hopefully it's valuable for everybody. And as an aside, we're going to be including some dinosaur facts and stories about building our community just because we can't resist talking about dinosaurs.
Yeah.
So sorry if you don't like dinosaurs, but we just can't help it.
But
So,
we promise it's related to community. And yeah, and in addition to, you can start a community at any point in time, and it's a lot of fun to have too. So, a quick story about us and how we got here. We loved dinosaurs so much that we had a dinosaur themed wedding. And in this photo, you can see that dinosaur. His name is Duncan. There's a person inside. It's like a human sized puppet, but with an animatronic face. And so the person inside could control the face, and it was pretty realistic. When Duncan, we got married at a wedding, and Duncan was normally
We got married at a zoo.
reserved. Sorry, we got married at a zoo. Yes, and Duncan normally was reserved for educational events for teaching kids, environmental and nature things. But they knew that we loved dinosaurs so much, so they let us have Duncan, and we were Duncan's first wedding. We're happy to say. So before the wedding, we'd recently rediscovered our love of dinosaurs. That was after a few years of living near the American Museum of Natural History in New York. And then we started the podcast shortly after the wedding because we had so much fun talking about dinosaurs. We didn't want to stop. And so now we publish new episodes every week. We've published over 350 episodes now. And over time, we've built up our community. And through the community, we've made a lot of really cool connections in the paleontology world. So why is community important? Well, a community, for podcasters, it starts with your listeners, and those include the listeners who are super fans of your work. They're the ones who are going to give you feedback when you're looking to make changes to your show, and they're the ones who are going to tell your friends and your family to listen to your show, and the ones who are ultimately going to be willing to pay to support you.
So that's sort of the first clue about why community is important, because they add a lot of value to you, both financially potentially, but also through spreading the word about your show and all that.
Right. And again, also they can be very supportive. So lots of good things.
So we're on to our first poll, which is, do you interact with your audience? Just any sort of interaction at all.
We'll give it a minute. Oh, cool. These people are sharing about their, oh, thank you for the wedding pic. That's cool. We got.
Okay, so I think the poll is posted. Let's see.
All right.
If we can follow along. Ooh, we got lots of votes for yes. Couple votes for no.
No big deal. We'll just, oh yeah, still some coming in,
Give it
but it
another
looks
second.
like most people are saying yes. That's
Okay,
awesome.
that's good. We want to get sort of a feel for where people are at in terms of, how much interaction they're doing.
Yep.
So for those of you that said no, it's not really a big problem. You can start at any time. We'll go over some easy ways that you can start building a community. And really, the reason we started with a question like, do you interact with your audience, is because if you're interacting at all, that means you have the beginnings of a community. Even if you're just emailing one or two people now and then, that's the start of a community. And then, so if yes, the answer is yes, you have a community.
Hooray. So this next one, this one is not a poll. I thought it'd be easier if maybe you could share in the comments, like, how do you interact with your audience?
Yeah, for those of you that said yes, you do interact
We
with your
can,
audience.
even if you want, bring up one or two people to talk about it. If you want community engagement.
Yeah, talk about community.
Okay, yeah.
So if you want to do that, folks, just indicate that in the chat and I'll bring you up.
And yes, that can include social media. Looks like we've got people saying Facebook, Instagram, Facebook group. And if anyone is interested in sharing a story, happy to bring you up.
I think we might have scared everybody off with our
Dinosaur.
inviting people onto the stage.
Dinosaur,
the dinosaur.
Duncan scared people off.
Greg wants to share. Greg, I'm going to bring you up.
Nice.
Greg Harrod coming to the stage.
Lots of Facebook groups.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of popular.
Yeah.
I'm excited to hear about your community, which I know is on Discord. Did I bury the lead?
No, all
No,
good.
that's perfect.
Yeah.
Foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Very
Oh, yeah,
good.
we've got email too.
All right, Greg is accepted and connecting. In a moment,
Katie's doing everything.
Great.
his
Email,
screen will
social
pop
media.
up.
I guess I should make a Facebook group. It's totally up to you if you're comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Here's Greg.
Hey,
Hey,
so I had to
Greg.
plug in my headphones so we didn't get echo real quick.
Oh yeah, it happens.
Yeah,
So-
so the question, go ahead with the question again.
How are you interacting with your audience, your community?
Yeah, so email list is primary, doing that. And then social media, I've dedicated social media accounts for the podcast itself. That's
Mhm.
primarily how I'm doing it. And
Nice.
then locally, I'm trying to build this community just with folks that I know, just talking with them directly.
Excellent.
That's great.
So you're doing both online and in real life.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
That's something we go into. Are you for social media? Are you in multiple channels, or you focus on one or two?
Well, I focus on LinkedIn first,
Mhm.
and then I had my dad on for an episode and realized that nobody's going to see that unless I get on Facebook. So I quickly created a podcast episode for Facebook. I had a guest on who was big on Instagram and realized, I need to help her out by getting an Instagram account. So I did that. And then I thought, well, why not Twitter as well? Because
Mhm.
SquadCast does such a great job. Ariel does such a great job of helping promote, as you guys probably know, but helping promote, especially on Twitter. So it seemed like a why not, and not huge audience yet or engagement, but just like you guys talked about on your podcast, Between Two Mics, it just grows. You just keep investing and it keeps
Mhm.
growing.
Oh, definitely.
So is your topic more professional? Is that why you started on LinkedIn?
Yes, it's connect, mobilize, deliver, connecting people, mobilizing them for action, and delivering results. So it's about career skills. It's based on mastering fundamental career skills to build your career.
Yeah, that
Cool.
sounds like a great place
Yeah.
to start then.
And it sounds like, yeah, you started in the places you knew your audience was, and then you branched out eventually. So it's not like you did it all at once. And
And it's interesting, and I'm sure you have the same thing. It's when you build that audience, you have some folks who are sitting in, like your professors that you talk to. That's your community that's more professional. But I'm sure you have the movie industry you talked about in your episode of when you interacted with creatives. There's another, they might sit somewhere else. And then the folks that just love dinosaurs like you guys do
Yeah.
can
definitely
be anywhere, right?
Oh,
How-
yeah.
Yeah. How do you do it? How did you first start off?
We started off with Facebook and Twitter, and then we kind of grew. Similar with you. We'd noticed, oh, there's a lot of dinosaur activity going on Instagram,
Mhm.
and then there's a lot of stuff on Pinterest.
Sabrina
and-
couldn't resist. Now we're also on TikTok and LinkedIn
Right.
and
I would say
everywhere.
for us, TikTok is more of for fun to experiment with at the moment. But yeah.
Nice.
We've got a question now. Do you recommend having social media channels separate from the entity publishing the podcast versus the org publishing the podcast, promoting the podcast on their own page? Oh, okay.
I guess it depends on what you're. So for us, our podcast is the entity publishing the podcast. So it's sort of the same thing, one and the same. So if you're an indie podcaster, it's probably going to be the same. But some people make a podcast and then they have their personal accounts already, and then they use their personal accounts to blast out everything. Or if you have a company account, I guess you could use that too.
Yeah.
So depends. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, Greg.
Sorry.
I got
We
the
forgot.
question popped up and I got
We got
distracted.
excited.
I did, yes. Okay. So how we interact with our audience, well, from the beginning, it was all about our listeners, our fellow dinosaur enthusiasts, as we like to call them. When we would always keep them in mind, we would respond to listener questions. We would we still talk to a lot of paleontologists, and we asked them topics that we knew our community was interested in hearing about. So I'd recommend you focus on your community from the start. If you haven't already started, if you've already started, that's okay. You can start focusing on your community now, and you want to figure out, who are your listeners or your ideal listeners, and what is it that they want to hear, and then deliver on what they want. So if there's specific topics or questions that they want answered, you can incorporate that into your episodes. Are there people that they would want to hear specifically be interviewed, reach out to them and see if you can get them on your show, because the worst they can do is say no. So it never hurts to ask. Now, we expanded as we grew and responded to more listener requests. So we started with answering questions, but then as we grew, we started incorporating news items that people shared with us. And we also made sure to have people on our show with compelling stories, and that we also, Garret and I, shared stories that we knew our listeners wanted to hear. And we've talked to paleontologists, paleoartists, people who worked on Jurassic Park and Jurassic World, writers, even dinosaur dancers. So it's a lot of different types of people who are dinosaur enthusiasts and who work with dinosaurs in some way. And we've gotten a lot of great feedback, and then our community, our listeners, they grew steadily. So based on the feedback we've gotten, we've made changes to our show, and we've incorporated more segments featuring things that our listeners have told us. So sometimes this means that they actually answer questions that we've asked on our show. As an example, there's one time we talked about, and here I'm getting into some dinosaur stuff because, again, can't help ourselves, but we talked about this news item. There's this dinosaur. It was found sitting on top of a nest, and there were at least 24 eggs under it. And on the show, we were wondering, well, how did so many eggs end up under this one dinosaur? And we got a lot of listener responses from that. And we learned from the responses that this is common behavior with modern birds, some modern birds. And on our show, we like to talk about how birds descended from dinosaurs. So this makes sense. And it turns out, for example, chickens and woodpeckers have all been observed with multiple parents sharing a single nest. So it's not like all those eggs came from one dinosaur.
Here's your first dinosaur fact of the presentation.
Yes. So if you're starting a podcast, you can also answer listener questions or talk about news items that listeners share with you. Maybe they'll share with you through email or social media, however you're connecting with them. Some podcasts also encourage listeners to call and leave voicemails, and then you can add those voicemails into segments of your show if you're comfortable with that. Oh, somebody said I saw that fossil while it was being prepared. That's cool.
Nice.
So when it comes to community, it's about starting small and then building. So don't worry, like, oh, I need thousands of people in my community right away. Like, just focus on what you can do day by day. And a big part of that is producing a high quality show and being consistent. So it's making sure that, you are feeling great and talking passionately when you're recording about your topic, making sure that you edit so it's professional, and then making sure that you publish consistently. So for us, we publish every week. So we make sure to get a new episode out every week. Some podcasts do every day, every other week, every month, seasonal, like whatever it is, just make sure that your listeners know what to expect and then deliver on that, because that builds some trust. And then they're going to be more likely to spread the word about your show. And there's a lot of power in word of mouth marketing.
Very true. So now we're on to our next question. This is not a poll, just a regular comment question.
Right.
Which is, where are your ideal listeners? So we heard from Greg. He figured out that a lot of his ideal listeners are on LinkedIn, which is it's great that he figured that out before even getting into it. But where else are your ideal listeners?
Right. It could be online. It could be places in person.
Yep.
Just kind of depends on what your topics are. So we'll give a second or a little bit, see if what's in the comments.
Yeah, so this could really be anywhere physical. It could either be a city or it could be a specific, it could be like a proper noun, like they hang out in parks or they like to go to, like a specific stadium.
Or, maybe your podcast is about breweries. So it could be specific cities that are known for their breweries.
Or just breweries in general.
Mm-hmm.
Or somewhere online, yeah, depending on where the community is.
Yep.
All right, we got some great answers here already. So different social media places where people are listening to podcasts. So I guess that could be in like podcast apps.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool.
Oh, we got a question too.
Oh.
Do you think having podcasts published as seasons is a disadvantage to having an episode released weekly, bi-weekly? Wondering if publishing in seasons would create barriers to connecting with your audience, since there would be a lack of consistency. Yeah, I think in general, because we also teach a podcast course, we usually recommend weekly if you can swing weekly.
But it depends on the topic. We know a lot of successful podcasters doing seasonal.
Yeah. But a lot of it is because of that consistency. So part of it is consistency in terms of responding to listeners and staying on top of news and things like that. But there's also a consistency for advertisers. So if advertisers are looking to target a specific month and you're on seasons and you don't line up with that schedule, that can be tricky.
Right. But if you do decide to go the seasonal route, there's a lot of people who will publish per season, 8 to 10 episodes or whatever the schedule is. And then in between seasons, they have bonus content for people.
And you can always release those weekly too.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So our next slide here, we've got finding your ideal listeners in meat space, as I like to call it.
Also known as in person.
You tell who created that title. So some topics are really regional. For example, if you have a music genre which is local to an area, for example, if you're doing country, maybe Nashville, or if you're talking about rock and roll, there are specific cities that are known for that. If you're talking about breweries, it could be a more regional thing, or it could just be specifically like within breweries. And that's more like this map we have going on, where you could have a map of legendary breweries and maybe think of ways you could connect with them. Or if, say, you have a sports podcast, there's that wherever that sport team is, that city is going to be a region where you're going to be able to find a lot of listeners, as well as in that stadium specifically. So if you're ever thinking about doing some sort of meetup, keeping in mind where your listeners are in reality is good, as well as where they are online. And again, it doesn't need to be all of your listeners. You're just looking for a place where a lot of your listeners are. So you're going to tend to see that they congregate in real life in places as well as digitally.
So this is a map from our website, and it's of dinosaur museums around the world. And we started I Know Dino actually a little bit before the podcast with this map, and then we branched out to the podcast after the wedding. And it all started with our trips to the American Museum of Natural History in New York. We kind of rediscovered our love of dinosaurs there. We'd find ourselves in the dinosaur halls all the time. And we wanted to start documenting the natural history museums and museums with dinosaur exhibits around the world, with plans to visit as many as possible. And since starting this map, we've taken multiple road trips based on the museums that we've marked, mostly the US and Canada, in addition to Australia. And now whenever we travel, we look up museums that are on the way or they're nearby if we're not having already a dinosaur specific trip, which often happens lately. Well, when we were traveling. So now we have about 350 museums on the map. I'm sure we'll be adding more. These are definitely not all of the museums around the world. And a lot of these additions were based on feedback from our community. So people requested that we would add new museums, and then we delivered on these requests because we wanted to create the content that our community was asking for. To add the museums on our map, we do have to have some very specific information. It's just the way the plugin works. So in some cases, our community provided us with spreadsheets with all the information that we needed to put it into our website.
Yeah. So, and one of those cases, basically, we had fallen behind and people were requesting a lot of dinosaur museums to add, but we were busy making the podcast, doing other stuff. And we reached out to one of those people who was sending us a lot of requests for dinosaur museums. And we asked him, well, can you fill out this template? Because that would save us a lot of time. We could get the museum up faster. And they were more than happy to do it. And then we gave them some recognition on the show. And it was a really nice sort of mutualistic, symbiotic relationship where they were really happy to help us. And they got some, shout out on the air.
Yeah.
And we got our museum map improved, and it was a great way to use community in a positive way to help us make a better product for everybody.
And also kind of further build our relationships too with people in the community.
Yeah.
So our community, they've told us to add museums that they've recently visited to our map. They've also told us that they've gone to museums that were on our map while they were on trips, based on what was nearby, basically what we do too when we go on trips. And in some cases, some of the people looked at our map and they realized there was a museum nearby where they lived that they didn't realize existed. So they started going, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. So for finding your ideal listeners online, because not everybody has a meet space location, which is obvious. And even if you do, there's probably an online place too. So one place is Reddit. I don't think anybody mentioned Reddit when we did our question, but it's a good place to find people that are already in your topic. You're not necessarily going to create a group on Reddit. You might, but in general, there's already a subreddit for almost everything. And people aren't necessarily looking to join a new subreddit that's very specifically branded. but you might be able to find an existing subreddit and find listeners and sort of get ideas about what the people that are interested in your topic might want to hear on a podcast. Our next one is Facebook groups. And
Sounds like a lot of people are doing that already.
yeah,
which is
everybody
great.
seems to be on board with Facebook groups. There are likely already multiple groups about your topic, but again, like all of you seem to already know, you could start your own and make it just your Facebook group for your specific podcast if you want to, if you're interested in and you think your listeners will be on Facebook and want to join you there. Then there's LinkedIn. We thought this one was less common, but Greg was ahead of us.
Greg knows.
But it could be really good if you have a professional topic like Greg, because, you know, you go where the people are is basically the gist of this. If they're on Facebook, go to Facebook. If they're only on Reddit, figure out a way to make that work. If they're on LinkedIn, make a LinkedIn group. And there's one last interesting one.
Twitter chats. This is a fun one where you have a hashtag, and then on a weekly or monthly basis, you can have a chat with the hashtag around a topic, and people know when they use that particular tag, they're part of the conversation. And you can have a theme, ask questions. I've seen it where people have like a guest speaker, and then that person answers questions for an hour. So all of these groups, they're great in terms of places where you can connect with your community, but I don't think you necessarily have to create your own group on these. You can also use it to kind of get a better feel for your ideal listeners and what kind of things that they like, or that they're asking about, different topics that they might be interested in that you could cover on your show. So there's a few ways to use this.
And it's ways to connect to existing communities too, because there are some Twitter chats that happen regularly and they're like, you know, ongoing. So every week there's a whole bunch of different, what do you call those, handles participating, and you could join in on that conversation too if you don't want to start your own immediately.
Nice. It looks like we've got a question about sponsorships, but do you want to take that now, or
we can wait till the end for that one?
Because we kind of touched on that, but we'll get back to that. All right.
So we've got one more poll here, and it's, how often do you engage with your community? Is it every day? Is it every week, every other week, or once a month or less?
Yes. So if you don't mind, in the polls section.
You might be able to guess where we're headed with this.
I guess while we wait, we can talk about this question.
Oh, sure.
So after hearing your conversation on Between Two Mics, I saw an energy drink with a dinosaur theme and then other products with the same. Have you pursued anything like this for podcast sponsorships? If so, would you share your experience and tips? If not, any reasons we should know?
Yeah, so we do sponsorships for our show. We have not had an energy drink. No. I think there are also beers that have.
Oh, yeah. I think those would tend to be more local, though.
Yeah, that's true, because they're usually microbreweries. But so what we usually look for when we're looking for a dinosaur related sponsor, we're looking for something that is usually online, because our audience is very widely spread. We don't have a very good meet space location. If we did, it would probably be California, but I think that might just be because that's where a lot of podcast listeners are. But yeah, so we've done like puzzles that are dinosaur themed. We do a lot of dinosaur books. We do other dinosaur things, like dinosaur events.
We've had some non-dinosaur ads as well.
Yes, we do a lot of non-dinosaur ads, because sometimes when it's a really niche topic like dinosaurs, it's easier to find more broad things like, you know, just people that are interested in learning things in general. So yeah, I guess in general for podcast sponsorships, you can reach out to them. Sometimes they reach out to you, and you probably go with like a CPM pricing, and then
we have found that because we're so niche, when we're able to match with someone else who is niche, that works the best. And we've just had the most success in general. So
yeah, you want as much overlap with your topic as possible, for sure.
Yeah. All right, let's see what people say in the polls. Oh, every week.
Wow.
Seems
people
to be
are
the winner.
On it.
Nice.
Everybody's got a Facebook group. Everybody's doing this every week.
Cool.
But it's okay. I mean, there isn't really a wrong answer to this.
No, it's just whatever you're comfortable with. And I'd say in a way that so your audience remembers that you've got that community going.
Yeah. So in terms of what we've seen, there isn't a lot of great data that we could find specifically, especially when you're talking about podcasting, about how much interaction is best. If you're looking at it from an advertising standpoint, it's like the more the better, right? Like Coca-Cola is fine if you see their ads 50 times a day. They want you in their face all the time. So really, the more the better is probably the answer, but it can be a little burnouty if you do too much. So Patreon recommends that you do at least bi-weekly when you're publishing content. And basically what they found, I couldn't find an actual source where they wrote this, but they've mentioned it multiple times in their events that they do, that if Patreon creators are publishing Patreon exclusive content less than twice a month, they tend to lose some listeners or lose some patrons. So basically, there's a good data point showing you that if you're doing less than twice a month, you might start losing a little bit of connection with your listeners. So that's what we see basically as the minimum if you're trying to get people to pay at least. But if you're not getting people to pay and you feel like, hey, I make an episode once a month and I'm going to interact once a month, that can be fine too. The key there is not burning out, because if you burn out, you're not going to be interacting at all anymore, and that's not what you want. And then keep in mind too, you can schedule posts. So you don't necessarily, like I have those 2 days scheduled, say you want to do it every Thursday and it just becomes a huge grind on certain weeks or you're going to be on vacation. There are types of interactions that you can schedule. Like you can schedule a tweet, you can schedule a post on Patreon, you can schedule other social media interactions, and you can let a little bit of the pressure off. You could do it once a month and make 4 interactions queued up so that you don't have to just constantly feel like you're, working super hard to do it all the time.
Right. I think it's called batching or something like that.
There's a lot of good apps too that help you batch social media stuff, especially.
So we'll go back to the meet space and ways to engage your community in person. So we've talked about, it's good to have live interactions with your community in addition to other types of interactions. And in the past, we've had some in-person meetups. This is a picture from our first one. It's a really good way to get together. You're in a relaxed setting. You're just chatting about your topic. Of course, in our case, it's dinosaurs. And if you want to do a meetup, it can be formal or informal or somewhere in between, whatever you feel like. For more formal meetups, you could, for example, have someone or yourself, you give a talk about a specific topic, and then people ask questions later. If it's more informal, you can go somewhere for happy hour and then just provide some name tags, make it really easy for people to introduce themselves to each other and, have that space to chat with you and with each other. For our first meetup in person, we took advantage of a lot of our listeners and dinosaur enthusiasts being in the same city. There was a big dinosaur conference. This was in Brisbane, Australia. So there's people coming in from all over the world, and it was really easy for us to meet up because there's one night where there weren't any additional activities going on. So we just had an I Know Dino meetup, and people were really excited to share what they'd learned throughout the day from all the talks. And then we all just talked about our common interest, which was dinosaurs. So I got meetup.
That's one of my favorite puns is meet, M-E-A-T.
Yeah. So you could figure out where your listeners are or where they might be. You could work with some existing events or places they might be, and then just have something really relaxed and informal.
Yeah. I like to do the more informal style. Sabrina likes to do more formal. That's why she's mentioning name tags and stuff. You can see no one in this picture has name tags, so you could guess who and how there aren't that many people there either, which is probably an argument for giving people more notice than I did for that meetup. Oops.
That's okay. It worked out. Oh, Greg used to live in Brisbane.
Oh, nice. Brisbane is wonderful.
Yeah. So now that we've talked about meet space and meetups, ways to engage with your community online. So one of the ways that we actually do it is through tools like SquadCast. For I Know Dino, we have had listeners reach out to give us feedback. Sometimes we have made mistakes on the show about the dinosaurs, and a lot of times these listeners are experts. So we invited them on our show as an interviewee. And having a tool like SquadCast, I mean, everybody here knows it's really great. Often we're talking to people in another state or even another country. So being able to connect remotely and so easily is pretty awesome. Now, in the last year, we've also done a lot of videos and live streams, and there's a lot of options when it comes to live streams. One that works really well for us is we have live Q&As. We do these watch parties with our patrons, our listeners, community, if you will, and we'll pick different movies or documentaries or TV shows, all dinosaur related, of course, to watch and chat together while we're watching. And so one of the times we watched a documentary made by a husband and wife team, Terry and Tara. And after the documentary, we had a live Q&A with them where our community submitted questions for about an hour. And then people really loved hearing more about the film that we just watched. There's a lot of other ideas for live streams too. You can do behind the scenes segments. You can share your expertise, maybe do a brief tutorial. You can even live stream you playing a game. It's if the game is related to your podcast topic. And we've done this a few times with dinosaur video games. There's some popular ones, and we'll just, be playing the game and then kind of talking in a similar way that we talk on the podcast, pointing out the dinosaurs, how scientifically accurate it is, or different fun facts about the things that you see on the screen. So I think Garret has fun with that.
Yeah, that is great.
Yep. So if you're live streaming, you want to make sure that, and this is, I guess, a difference between me and Garret, get things set up ahead of time and give people plenty of notice about when you're going live, just like we did today. And SquadCast is real great about that. So if you're having a Q&A session, if people are feeling shy, maybe have a couple of questions prepared ahead of time that you can answer to get the conversation started.
All right. So the next point that we want to make is it's good to have your community in a central place, or at least to have a main place. It's okay to be on like all the social media if you want to. We do that too. But in terms of like the main community, the place where you direct people to interact with both you and each other, it's nice to have one place, a consistent call to action in that way. So for us, we did start with like email and some things like that, but our first real community site was probably Patreon. And when we started there, the reason we consider that sort of the start of our community is it offers a little bit of interaction between community members. It's not just one-on-one between the creator and the patrons, but it's mostly one-on-one. Most people don't even realize that they can talk to each other. There's like sort of a hidden page of community where other people can post things. They don't even realize that exists. I forget it exists. People probably post there like once every 6 months on our Patreon. So it's good, but really the best thing about Patreon is it gives you that value for value option. So we can give our listeners extended interviews and books and shout outs and access to our community for a monetary gift so they can help us create the podcast in return, which is great. But yeah, like I said, access to our community is sort of through Patreon, and we actually integrate it with Discord, and then we use the Discord as our hub of our community, and it is a paid community in our case. You can do it free or you can do it paid. So if you're doing a Facebook group, that means that it's probably free. I don't think Facebook has an option to force people to pay in order to join the group. I guess you can manually do that probably. I think there are some businesses that do that where you get access to an exclusive Facebook group if they donate somewhere else. So you could potentially do it there too if you're interested. But if you're not familiar with Discord, just a little bit of background, it's just like Slack or any other modern chat room. For us, it's only for patrons that have access to it. You can set up an integration with Patreon, and it'll automatically only allow people that sign up and put their Patreon handle or their Discord handle into Patreon to get in. You can also do it so that there's a free portion of your Discord, or you can just do an entirely free Discord. Anything in between, it's a great way to get all of your patrons in one place potentially. But the side benefit is we've never had a troll, because I think paying to troll is completely pointless. So yeah, it's just, I love Discord and I love having it behind a paywall. It works really well. And you can set the minimum as like $1. So it shouldn't be a barrier for people to join. Yeah. So there isn't a way to gift Patreon memberships, unfortunately, yet. But I think you could manually add someone to Discord if you really looked into it. I haven't tried though.
You got dinosaurs eat trolls.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think Discord or any similar app that allows people to interact with each other is a good choice for your central place for a community. And then on top of that, I would recommend you yourself post at least once a week, maybe twice or bi-weekly, once every other week, just because you want to engage a little bit with the listeners who are mostly there to see you. Some people want to join a community to talk to other enthusiasts, but if you have a podcast, a lot of them are also interested in seeing specifically your thoughts and things that you care about and details that only you can share. So I recommend that you get in there and get your hands dirty once in a while. With Discord, it's super easy because it's a chat room. So you can just post one sentence like working on this week's episode and people will be excited to see that kind of stuff. And I think the weekly works well if you're doing a weekly podcast. You can post something about your new episodes when you release the episode. You can mention something like, oh, when I was researching this topic, I also found this other thing, but it was a little too much detail to get into in the episode.
Right. For us, we often will describe a dinosaur as best we can in an episode because there's a lot of new dinosaur discoveries. And then there's often in the papers we talk about some kind of paleo art or maybe pictures of the fossils. And afterwards, we'll share it in our Discord so that people can get an idea of what we were talking about.
Yeah. Get some of that stuff that doesn't translate well in audio into the Discord. Works really great. And otherwise, though, if you don't publish weekly and you still want to do some sort of update on a weekly or semi-frequent basis, you can post just news stories. You can do links in there. Anything really to start a conversation is great to throw into your Discord or other place like Facebook group.
Mhm.
But yeah, we have lots of channels for different topics in Discord. That's one of the nice things. You can have all these different threads. We have a channel for a game server. That one we just kind of started on a whim. We might sunset it soon because not a lot of people want to play this game in the game server. But it's really easy to start and end channels is the great thing about it. And it is also really useful for announcements. You can do this on Facebook too, any central community, because on Patreon or in email, a lot of people ignore or disable the emails that they get. But with Discord or with Facebook or one of those things, a lot of times you can tag people. In Discord, the way you do it is you do it at everyone, and then everybody gets a little ping saying, oh, there's this comment that tagged you. And you can make an announcement like we did in this example here where we were about to do a live stream. And then we have a link to that live stream. And a lot of people join. Whereas when we post it on Patreon and it comes through an email, people just don't get it as quickly. So we like to integrate our Discord with as many Patreon rewards as possible to encourage people to get there. That's where people go to request a dinosaur for us to cover, or where we chat during our watch parties, and also where those questions go, like for Terry and Tara, when we had our Q&A post watch party, people could post the questions into the Discord in advance too.
Mhm.
So it's really nice to just have one central place for most of your communication. It makes things a lot easier and a little more interactive between your listeners as well, not just one-on-one you two listeners. So we've heard some really good success stories. Some of our listeners have even met up in person after meeting in our community.
Yeah, that was
And
cool to hear.
I think that was actually at a museum through our museum map. It was like a double link there. But again, you don't have to use Patreon or Discord. There are lots of options out there. You can make it free or you can make it only for members. And yeah, I just recommend highlighting one place so that you get a real conversation going in one specific place.
Yeah, and it's never too early to start. If you're starting your podcast or even if you've already launched, we encourage you to have a platform, a central place as soon as possible where your community can go to connect. We started our Patreon about 6 months in, but there's a lot of podcasters who launch at the same time as their show. So never too early. And again, it doesn't have to be Patreon. There's a lot of tools and platforms out there where you can host forums or chats. The main thing, though, is to make sure wherever you are, keep it friendly. That'll motivate people to stay a part of your community.
All right, so our last question, it's again a poll.
Yep.
And
Last poll.
Yeah, simple yes or no question. Do you work with your community to improve your show?
And
And you might be able to guess where we're going with this. Basically, what we're talking about here is surveys. So if you've surveyed your audience, or I guess if people have recommended things to you to improve your show and you've taken them up on it, that'd be another way.
while we're waiting, we've got some more questions. Can you share some CTA language that has been particularly impactful on your audience, either on the podcast or on social media, Discord? Let's see. In general, it's best to keep it simple. One CTA if you can per episode. That's what we try to do. We didn't start out that way, but it's something we've been doing lately, and I think it's been working.
That's one of the main reasons we like the one central place. That way it's not follow us on Twitter at this, follow us on Facebook at this, join our Discord here. We just say join our Patreon, and then the Patreon includes the Discord and all of that kind of stuff. So
we do emphasize, you're a part of our community, you're a fellow dinosaur enthusiast. Here's what you can do. You can talk to all these people about different dinosaur things, and then also the additional perks that we have with Patreon.
So technically, we are in lots of places. We have all the other social media channels, but we never mention them. So we use that as a way to get people to our show that are already on those platforms. But once people know about us, we direct them to one specific place. So we're just saying, go to our Patreon and Discord. I think the clearness of that message is useful. But the other thing that's really helpful is if you have some sort of either deadline or reason for people to go there. So, for example, when we're about to take a big trip, like a business trip, and we say, hey, we could really use some money or help paying for this expensive flight and all that kind of stuff, that helps people get motivated to join.
Right. Because then they're really helping out and being a big part of our community.
Yeah. Or any other thing, if you're doing a giveaway, if you're doing anything like that. And then just, I guess when you're talking about a call to action to join a community, if there's something specific going on in the community that you can highlight, like we're going to do a watch party this day. If you join our community, you can talk with us. Then you can get people in.
So for the poll, do you work with your community to improve your show? We've got a couple yes votes and a few sort of votes.
Nice. We finally found one. Something we can teach people.
So if you said no, we recommend you start. And if you said yes, that's awesome.
And if you said sort of, that's okay.
That's totally fine. There's no wrong answers here.
Yeah. So for using your community or getting feedback from your community to help improve your show, really the best way I would say to do it is to survey your community, because if you're getting just one-on-one emails from people, a lot of times you'll hit a nerve with somebody and it might just sort of be a pet peeve for that one person, and most people might not care about that topic. Like it could be a pronunciation thing, it could be some detail about a topic that's really niche. So the way to get a good feel for the audience as a whole is to do a survey, because then you can get some good statistically significant results that you can act on. So this is an example of one of our surveys. That's our survey from last year. We do an annual survey, so we do one every year. That's pretty typical of podcasts, and they're very easy to do. So we use Google Forms. It's free. It's very simple. You can add as many questions as you want. There are some guidelines, like probably not more than 10 questions. You want it on one page because you don't want people giving up halfway through. But we also use a link shortener called bit.ly to make the URL easier to remember. For example, I think our last survey was like bit.ly/dino survey 20 or something like that.
It's because we're saying it on the show, and so you want it to be easy to remember when they're done listening to the episode.
Exactly. Yeah. So we also have it included in our show notes and everywhere where you would get access to our show. But it's good to also have it spoken clearly and in an easy to remember way, so that people that can't get to it or forget to go to your show notes, they might remember the URL. But again, it's a really great way to improve your show, but you also can use it to get information for your sponsors, because a lot of sponsors want to know some specific details about who's on the other side of the podcast, who's on the speaker side of the podcast. And the way you do that is by asking demographic questions. And it can also help you find more people like them. If you know that, say, 70% of your audience is male and Reddit skews male, you might want to go there. If you know that 70% of your audience skews female and Pinterest skews female, then you might want to go to Pinterest. There's a lot of little things you might learn from surveying your audience and getting some demographic information, but really that's mostly for advertisers. The big benefit, though, is for your show. And so I keep a running list of questions that I'm curious about, like things about the show where I'm just like, do people actually like this? Would they like more of this? Would they like less of this? I keep it on my phone all year. I make little comments once a month or so when I think of something I'm editing and I'm like, I don't know if that's good, but maybe I'll leave it in, maybe I won't. And then once I get to that survey time, I can ask what segments people like best. I can ask about segments I'm thinking about adding or removing. And you can also ask an open-ended question. We almost always ask a question like, are there any other segments that we should include, with just a long fill in the blank, that some people answer in paragraphs. And it's just a great place to get ideas for your show, because sometimes they'll give you an idea for a specific episode, and other times they'll say like, oh, I really love it when you do this type of interview. And if multiple people are saying that, it's probably a really good idea to expand that for your show. So you really want to give your community a place to give you that information. And then once you implement it, you can give them credit for those new segments or improvements that you make. And people will feel great because they're like, hey, I helped make this show better, and they're listening to me.
It's further establishing your relationship with them.
Yeah.
So there's other benefits of growing your community. There's more. And I've got another story, another dinosaur story, because can't help myself. one of our dinosaur adventures. This is a picture of Eromanga Natural History Museum. It's this amazing dinosaur museum. It's in the middle of nowhere in the outback of Australia. Something like under 30 people live in Eromanga, and it's pretty remote. The closest town next to it is 70 kilometers away. Twice a week, they have to have road trucks or semis come to drop off supplies.
Road trains.
Yeah. This museum, though, it's known for their spectacular sauropod fossils. You think the dinosaurs that look like Brachiosaurus from Jurassic Park, it's those giants with the long necks and the tails. And they're building a bigger museum. They've actually got at least one building already up, and I think there's plans for more because they found so many fossils they can't fit them all in the museum. They can't display them all. So we ended up at this museum specifically because of our community. The people who worked at the museum, they reached out to us and asked, like, hey, could you add us to your dinosaur museum map? And we started chatting, and then they invited us to the museum for a tour because this was the year that there was the dinosaur conference in Brisbane. And so we met them in person for the first time at the conference. And then after the conference ended, we drove it's about 12 hours or 1,000 kilometers to Eromanga. So this is October 2019. And Garrett and I, it actually ended up being our 5th wedding anniversary. So it's pretty fitting. We got to celebrate with dinosaurs. The people at the museum didn't know it was our anniversary, but we ended up having a really lovely meal with them. They cooked us this amazing food, and then it was actually a candlelit dinner, and we got to chat about dinosaurs all night. It was great.
It was basically a coincidence because they were like, there are no restaurants, nobody lives here, so we have to make you dinner.
Yeah.
By necessity. And then I don't know why they made it candlelit. They were just really classing it up for us.
Yeah, well, it was beautiful. So this all happened because of our dinosaur podcast and our community.
Yeah, we definitely would have never had this without the community aspect of the Dinosaurs podcast specifically. So even if the podcast was a big success, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah. So here's just a couple of pictures from the inside of the museum and some sauropods, but we're running low on time, so we'll just get to the end of this.
So for our recap, some keys to how to build a community with your growing podcast. Number 1 is to focus on your community from the very beginning. And you want to respond to your listeners. You want to interview people if you can, if it fits with the format of your show. And you want to be consistent both in responding to people and in creating your show, because it feels like you need a consistent base for the show, for the community. And that's going to be your podcast being released. If you take a year off, your community might languish a little bit. So you want to be consistent all around. The next key is to connect with your community in a central place. So that could be Discord, it could be a Facebook group, it could be a subreddit, it could be on your LinkedIn page, it could be wherever you want it to be, but you want it to be a place where people can connect with each other and not just with you, so that it's really a community of people interacting with each other, like this dotted line picture. Not everybody is going to that middle green guy. He must be the podcaster, but they're also going to each other. So it's a community in that way. And then the last thing is you want to be interactive. You can do meetups, MEAT ups, meet space meetups.
In person, also known as.
You can do live streams online. You can also just find other places and ways for people to engage with you in real time. And also, it's good to mix in a little bit of asynchronous stuff for people that are in other time zones and can't interact with you live all the time.
So thank you again for having us. Just one last thing I want to mention. If you want to learn even more about building a community, as well as how to create, launch, grow, and monetize your podcast, we are teaching a comprehensive online course about podcasting that opens up next month. And you can sign up at completepodcastingcourse.com to be notified when it opens. And in the meantime, there's also a fun quiz you can do to discover which stage of podcasting you're in. So thank you for having us. I think we've got some time for questions.
Yeah, so throw them into that question box if you have them. But I think we can get into the questions that have been asked.
Yep.
I'm back.
Hello.
Let's just make sure we got through all of these questions. So where would you distribute these surveys? Did we do that?
I don't think so.
No.
So
Let's do it.
The first year we did it everywhere. And we like put it out on Twitter. I think I even put it on Reddit. We put it all over the place, but our answers weren't as good. they were good answers, but they weren't all answers from our listeners. So I put in a question of, do you listen to the show? And I always include that question because then I can just not even look at all the answers that are no. Because like, how are you going to answer what your favorite segment is if you've never listened to the podcast? So when we did the first year and we posted it everywhere, I think like 3/4 of the people had never listened to our podcast. So it wasn't super useful. So after that, what we started doing is we just mention it on the podcast and we put it in our Discord where it is only people that listen to the podcast and on Patreon. But we don't really try to force it out as many places as possible. We want people answering that listen to the show regularly.
Awesome. Can you please share your survey as a sample?
Yeah, sure.
Do you want to just post it in the chat?
Okay, give me a second to find it.
We got you, Tracy. We will post that in the chat shortly. Another question from Greg. Do you promote your survey during the show?
Yes. So while we're doing the survey, we usually spend, I would say, about a month, usually when we're promoting a thing, no matter what the thing is, if it's a new book, if it's the survey, if it's our trip somewhere, we spend about a month advertising it or promoting it on the show. Sometimes it's as little as 2 weeks. And so we'll mention it multiple times. We'll usually mention it in the beginning, then we'll maybe do a mid-roll ad for it. We do the dynamic ad insertion, which is really useful. And then we'll do at the very end, Sabrina always does the call to action at the very end, like, now that you're done listening, here's the call to action, and that would be the survey.
Mm-hmm.
I think you should make a copy.
Oh,
because I think it's closed.
Oh, okay. We'll copy it.
Okay. Greg says, I would be interested in hearing how SquadCast through Ariel is building community and get your input, because your conversation on the podcast, then this webinar, are helping me to feel more like the SquadCast community. I'm sure there are some lessons there for us as podcasters to learn from. You want to respond to that?
Oh, I thought that was a question for you.
Greg, will you let us know who is that question for? I'd be interested in hearing how SquadCast through Ariel is building community and get your input. Maybe.
I don't know whose yours is.
So Greg, just let us know. I can start answering. When I started at SquadCast about a year ago, both. Okay, cool. When I started at SquadCast about a year ago, obviously SquadCast had been in existence for 4 years at that point. So a community did exist, but it was my job to kind of get them into one place or a few different places that folks wanted to be. So we initially started with a Facebook group, and Facebook groups were great, but it wasn't where people wanted to spend a lot of time. That's what prompted us to want to start the Slack channel, Squad Pod, which if you're interested in joining, we can put a link in the chat. And that really is kind of a more dense place where folks can connect with each other who are Squadcasters, ask questions about SquadCast, ask questions about podcasting in general, have opportunities for promotion and things like that. I think from my perspective, I'm a little biased because I am the community manager. I think it's going really well. But I would love to hear from Rock if he's here, and if we have time, what the benefits are or what they have been of having a community, if you want to just type that into the chat. And I think what's interesting is that we hired a community manager before we hired a marketing person. I think that shows how important community is to retention of customers. So yeah, I'll leave it at that, and I'll pass it over to y'all.
Yeah. So for us, the main thing is SquadCast is the way we get our community onto our show when they are a good fit to come on the show. So when we have a paleontologist, for example, and they want to share some topic that, they listen to our show and they're like, ooh, you mentioned this thing, I want to elaborate on that. And they just send us an email about it. And we're like, oh, well, while you're elaborating on that, how about you come on the show and tell everybody else about it too? So that's really the way for us that we use SquadCast to interact with the community. And we also build our community with other podcasters. So when we're doing cross promotions, we almost always use SquadCast to record, say, like we just did one on 2 days ago, I think. There's another dinosaur podcast and we were collaborating with them. So we recorded through SquadCast both sides of our cross promotion, and then so now our communities are joining in that way.
I would say too, Ariel, you're doing a fantastic job, because I feel like the community has definitely grown with SquadCast, and it seems really easy to connect with podcasters. And we even, as an example, just a couple weeks ago, you posted something on Twitter to kind of connect podcasts who were in similar topics, and we ended up connecting with the show, and now we're doing a cross promotion with them. So,
yeah, I love that. I love to hear that. Okay, Greg, let us know if that answers your question, and I think we'll take one more. Do you, from podcastersdirectory.com, do you engage with your community via AMA episodes?
Oh, interesting. So we haven't done an AMA episode. We've answered a couple questions on the show where people ask a question and then we go like, okay, so we think other people will be interested in that aside from just answering your email or your question directly to us. So we've done like a one person AMA, I guess. But then the other form that we've done is we have done Q&As. We did one on, let's see, it was Instagram Live. We did an AMA, and we're about to do one on YouTube, but we haven't done a podcast specifically AMA because we have so much dinosaur news to talk about all the time. It's crazy how much dinosaur news there is. And then Sabrina also has this huge backlog of dinosaur requests to get through. So it's like we have so much content that we're still catching up on the regular podcast stuff, so we don't have time for the AMA.
But maybe someday,
podcast,
because we like to try new things.
Yeah,
it's a good idea. Content.
Yeah.
All right. It is 5:00 Eastern, 2:00 Pacific. Our hour is up. I hope that this was helpful for our attendees. The replay will be available immediately afterwards. And so, Sabrina and Garret, there are a few questions still in the Ask a Question tab. So if you have a moment and you want to answer those in words, you're welcome to type responses to them. And I'm sure people would appreciate that very much. Before we head out, where can folks find you and follow you?
So, we say Patreon, but actually everything is also on our main website, iknowdino.com, and that's where you'll have links to the podcast, to all the different places we are on social media, and to our Patreon.
Yeah. And then we have our course, which is completepodcastingcourse.com if you want to learn more about creating a community or creating, if you want to learn how to do advertising or any of that kind of stuff for podcasting too.
Yep. Sorry, that's 2 CTAs.
Yeah.
No, it's great. And that's it from us. SquadCast likes to do these events about once a month. So if you have an idea for an event, please let us know. We'd love to hear from you. And between now and then, let's stay in touch on social media. We're at SquadCast FM, wherever you get your social media. Have a great day, everybody. Happy weekend.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.